let's call it $2,000 a month, you faithfully put away that 2,000 because it's something that you were not getting before. 3 years, you'll have a tiny sum that you could put down on a car, like a pro box that you have to drive to go to work, and you don't have to stand up in the sun or think about rain to get a vehicle to drive. So yeah,
$2,000 a month over 3 years.
That's
Maybe
$2,000.
you think you can put out on a car with that?
yeah, a little pro box.
Like a 20-year-old pro box.
That was Fayval Williams speaking to Dion Jackson Miller on All Angles, the last show that she aired, that was aired on television, Jamaica. Now, that's an interesting perspective that Fayval Williams is projecting to Jamaicans, that they could put down $2,000 per month because of the paltry increases that they'll be receiving in the next budget year, the next fiscal year, that she would be affording the Jamaican workers, particularly those in the public sector. So they could put down $2,000 per month, and if they do it over 3 years, then they would be able to buy a Pro Box car, and they would no longer have to deal with the natural elements such as, hot sunshine and rain, and just waiting at the bus stop, for a bus that perhaps never will appear. Because, we understand that we are not an organized society in Jamaica. Now, what that interview indicates is the fact that our leaders are totally out of touch with the realities of Jamaicans. Totally out of touch they are. And I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and she was telling me that she knows where Fayval Williams hails from Ty Dixon, right? That's, I think, there's part in Monique, Claremont area. And, but the fact of the matter is that even if someone is coming from the lower stratum of society, doesn't mean, therefore, that they've got to remember, or they're obligated. They should try as much as possible to remember from whence they came. But many Jamaicans and people in general, it's a human characteristics, right? It's the propensity of many humans not to remember from whence they came, right? And their humble beginnings. And Fayval Williams, superficially, she looks like a humble person, somebody who could be an anti-Fayval, as she's popularly called in Jamaica. But she seems to be in alignment with the global elites. And, she went to Ivy League schools in the United States, or Ivy League universities, and they normally indoctrinate you there into globalization and global affairs. That is what these schools do. The Harvards and the University of Pennsylvania's and whatever. They don't really educate your children. They indoctrinate them into the world of the elites so that they can take up their places. So when you think that your son or your daughter is working for a company on Wall Street and whatever, they're not there to definitely look out for and to develop the lives of the impoverished, but they're there to get as much and to transfer as much wealth over to the wealthy elite class. That is what they're tasked with doing, and also to maintain the ideology of the elites, whether they're in sociology or they're in science, right? They're getting an objective education, as it were. And many people pay huge amounts of money just because they want to send their children. And I'm not suggesting here that you should not send your children if they've earned a scholarship. Send them by all means, but you also have to educate them before they are sent and encourage them to be lifelong students. And by lifelong students, I mean reading. Very important that we understand that reading is a fundamental ingredient, a fundamental part of our life, or should be a fundamental part of our lives. Many people don't understand that, and as a result of that, they find themselves confused. And we saw that during the pandemic, where many people were confused and they just simply followed the status quo and they did what they were told to do, rather than sitting down and doing their own research. They would rather look at the stats given by, official government data, and you just decided to follow what they say and think that that was going to be true. And that was a great propaganda, and it really showcased the world in terms of the levels of education that we have been endowed with. Now, let me begin by saying that Fayval Williams, the current Minister of Finance, when she was getting that position, many people doubted her capacity as someone to stand up and make a budget presentation. She did so as the first female Minister of Finance of Jamaica. She was able to, she stood up and she read. That's all I can say, that she stood up and she read what was prepared for her to read. I got the impression that she wrote the speech herself. I'm not sure. It was simplistic, and it was not something that was, that showed the reality of what is happening in everyday Jamaican lives. I think that Fayval Williams just was articulating the sentiments coming out of Washington, D.C. and from these global institutions, because she's aligned with globalization and all of its philosophies. So she presented a speech that was quite empty, and they did not seek to address the wide-scale poverty that we see in Jamaica, because Jamaica is a third world country. And I think that, as what's his name, Julian Robinson presented in his budget presentation, we are suffering from food insecurity, and that was coming from the United Nations. It was also published in the Jamaican Gleaner, in which it suggested that over 55% of Jamaicans suffer from food insecurity, from severe to moderate food insecurity. That was published in the Daily Gleaner, coming from the United Nations. And we were only second to Haiti. So Haiti was, number one on the list, and we were number second in the Caribbean region. Right. And based on what they're saying, I think they had from 2019 to 2021 and 2021 to 2023. I think that was the dates. Those were the dates given. And we were, ranked second in the region, right? Second to Haiti. And I've been saying it on the channel long that, we are not much better than Haiti. We are not showing that we are a developing economy. We're developing for the rich, but we're not developing for everyday Jamaicans, for the ordinary Jamaican, for the common man on the streets. We are not developing the economy for these people. And that is the reason for which we see that Fayval Williams can speak so glowingly about the economic achievements that her government has been able to amass. At the same time, we're not seeing it on the grounds. The ordinary man is not seeing what Fayval Williams is speaking about. They have not experienced all of her assertions. But, she talked about the fact that, our macroeconomic stability is great. And she said that the Fitch, these credit rating agencies and Moody's and all of them have praised us and have acknowledged our political commitment to fiscal prudence, right? And to also to maintaining our primary surplus. The primary surplus that we, received, for example, in 2013 was 7.5, and I think we might be now at probably 7 or 6.5. I don't know where we even are now, because the IMF agreement has not been disclosed to us. We're just hearing that debt has to go down 68% of GDP for the next fiscal year, and for 2027 to 2028 rather, we have to go down to 60, or we're on track to going down to 60. So everything is about debt reduction, but there was no growth agenda. There was no growth agenda mentioned in Fayval Williams's presentation. Now, how are we going to develop as a nation if there is no growth agenda, if we're just saying that all you have to do is to put down your debt? And even when she was suggesting, and I'm happy that John Jackson Miller pushed back, that people can save $2,000 per month and then they'll be able to buy a Pro Box car. She intimated that, when asked by Dion, do you think that that's sufficient? And that's going to be able to buy a car or put down for a car for a Pro Box car that probably costs 800,000 to, well, I don't know how much it costs, but but it costs quite a bit of money, right? And but people are suggesting, she was suggesting that Fayval Williams was suggesting that, the fact that they were not getting it, that they were not expecting it, yes, they can. But the fact of the matter is that Fayval Williams need to understand that the cost of living in Jamaica has soared and continues to soar. So even if they get a paltry $2,000 per month as an increase on their salaries, that is not, they have to put that in something else. Because maybe they owe a debt, maybe they have to buy something, a nutrient that they lacked, that they could not buy, a food item that is very important for their body to sustain their bodies. So it doesn't mean therefore because they weren't expecting it, means therefore that yes, we have surplus here. Oftentimes it's a need. It's not even a want, it's a need, because the salaries in Jamaica, the wages in Jamaica are very low. So this increase that Fayval Williams is talking about is anything great to speak about, and inflation continues. Inflation continues a bit. That, she might talk about the raw currency and that is 159, and don't tell me about that nonsense, because at the end of the day, that's not really what they're showing us about 159 to $1, that is not real. What is real is the cost of living when you go to the grocery stores and what you have to pay. That is where now the rubber hits the road. Has nothing to do with their $40. Their fiat currency has absolutely nothing to do with anything, right? And that is what people learn in economic school. And they think that that is real and it's complicated. It's not complicated. Nothing is complicated about the dollar. Absolutely not. It's false, and that is why they have made it complicated, because they are lying. And oftentimes when you lie, you have to, find ways, you have to create new ways of justifying what you are talking about, justifying your lies. Okay, and that is what they do there at the Bank of Jamaica. Now, Fayval Williams' presentation, I really took a long time to, it was very difficult to go through her presentation, her budget debate in the parliament. I don't think that Fayval Williams has the capacity to remain in that position as a Minister of Finance, especially at a critical moment of Jamaica's development. I think we need somebody more astute, somebody who is nimble on their feet, and somebody who is able to address concerns, the everyday concerns of Jamaicans. Yes, we understand that we live in a globalized economy and that we have to listen to these so-called globalist institutions like the IMF and the World Bank and all of that. At the same time, we've got to make the budget presentation also a reality, even if they're not able to achieve, if what she was going to say, she wasn't going to be able to achieve the objectives and the goals mentioned in the speech, but she has to give Jamaicans some amount of hope. She has to imbibe in them some amount of faith in the Andrew Holness-led government, which she did not. She did not. She just simply took a speech and she quoted data from these international agencies and thinking, Fayval Williams, the information that is coming from Fitch and Moody's have nothing to do with the reality of Jamaica. Have absolutely nothing to do with the realities of Jamaica. And they could be coming from Harvard or Princeton or Yale or University of Pennsylvania. It's lacking, it's not true, it is not cerebral, it is not intellectual. It is because we have these are name brand institutions, so you believe them and you believe what they say, because you have no mind to think for yourselves. But if you understand the real world and you understand how these institutions work, then you'll understand that they don't care about what happens on the ground for the everyday Jamaicans. Now, there's a book here, and I wanted to read a few things from it, talking about the whole matter of globalization. There is no known case in which globalization has led to prosperity in any third world country. None. It hasn't led to any prosperity, as they're telling us. And none of the world's 24 reasonably developed capitalist nations, regardless of their ideological, all right, regardless of their ideological explanations, got where they are by following any of the prescriptions contained in globalization doctrine. So they're telling you what to do. They're telling you that you have to bring down your debt and all of this rigidity and all of this austerity, but they understand that that is not going to bring them prosperity. Okay, and what Elon Musk is doing in the United States, which is equivalent to what the IMF does and the World Bank to third world countries, is not necessarily addressing the debt crisis. What he is doing and what Trump are doing, they are simply, as Jamaica is doing, transferring the wealth from the poorest to the richest. That is what they're doing. But they have done it in such a clever way in which they're telling you that you have to lower your debt, but who racked up the debt in the first place, as I have been suggesting on this channel? The same elites. And then they say, oh, it's you. You have been consuming a lot, so you have to pay your debt. And it is their debt and their children's debt. But the impoverished Jamaican, the one who is pushing his wheel cart, the nurse, the doctor, the nurses, the doctors, the teachers, the lawyers, they are the ones who will have to suffer and bear the weight of the, this sort of greedy and avaricious nature of our ruling elite class. Something that you've got to understand, okay? So this is very important that we understand. What globalization has produced, in the words of De Rivero, is not NIC's newly industrialized countries, but about 130 NNEs, which non-viable national economies. That is what Jamaica is, a non-viable national economy based on what we are doing, following slavishly the prescriptions coming out of the IMF, a ruthless and criminal institution, right? And, or even worse, he's saying they are ungovernable, chaotic entities, which he styles as the UCES, ungovernable, chaotic entities. And that is what you see in Jamaica. A chaotic economy. An economy that is not working in the interest, for the interest of the ordinary Jamaican. And people don't know what is really happening. What is really happening there? It's just chaos. And we hear one thing today and we hear another thing tomorrow. She presents something like Fayval Williams presents something today and tomorrow it's changed. It's just, nobody knows really what is happening in the land of Marcus Garvey. There is occasional evidence that this result is precisely what the authors of Globalization intended. Order out of chaos. That is what they're intending. That is what we see happening now in Washington, D.C. with Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Don't believe that Donald Trump is crazy. And don't believe that the chaotic, you're thinking that he's chaotic, and chaotic it seems like he is. However, there is a sort of strategy. There is a sort of methodology. It's a methodology. It's a method to achieving what they want to achieve, right? They know what they're doing and they make it chaotic that you can't even understand what they're doing and what the real agenda is. You just think he's a madman, right? Okay, maybe you're the one who's crazy, but he's certainly not crazy. He knows and they know what they're doing. And Trump is not necessarily the author of these things. I want you to understand that. It's the military-industrial complex, the empire that reigns supreme over these policies. Now, we have to understand that we cannot engage ourselves in these free trade agreements because we know that there's nothing free about them. And this is what the people, the likes of Fayval Williams would like to present to us, that yes, we're doing well because her slave masters in Washington, D.C. told her so. And she's just bearing the message to you that that is so, but that is not so, right? Our economy is a plantation, an enslaved one, and how are we going to take or extricate ourselves out of that sort of predicament. The United States' chosen instruments for putting this strategy into effect, which is globalization and the impoverishment of nations, were the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Let me just go up a paragraph just to lay the context, because there's so much to unpack here. Starting in approximately 1981, the United States introduced under the cover of globalization a new strategy intended to accomplish two major goals. First, to discredit state-assisted capitalism. That means the government should not play a role in the economy, like Japan's, and prevent its spread to any countries other than East Asian NICs. So that is what the United States allowed. That is why you talk about Singapore, because Singapore is in that region, right? So the United States allowed the governments there to have state intervention, where the government could intervene in the economy and they could control what is happening in the markets. But it didn't allow that for Jamaica. We have to understand that globalization is not a level playing field, that what the United States demands for Barbados is not what it's going to demand for Jamaica. Two different economies, two different histories, two different countries, two different economies. Well, I did say that. We've got to understand that. Don't think that the US is thinking that, oh, this is a black country and that is another black country. That is what they have told you, and you learn that and you run with that. But that is not how the real world is governed. Hope you understand what I'm suggesting here. So we talk about which had already industrialized by following the Japanese model, and second, to weaken the sovereignty of third world nations so that they would become even more dependent. So Jamaica's sovereignty is weakened. And we saw that during 2010, right? And that is why the Jamaican government has to be careful about how it deals with this whole matter of the Cuban doctors and Cuban nurses. I will address that in a video tomorrow. So you can get online tomorrow and you will see my publishing a video on that. That they would become even more dependent on the largest of the advanced capitalist nations and unable to organize themselves as a power bloc to negotiate equitably with the rich countries. They can't negotiate. Jamaica is too weak now to negotiate equitably with the likes of the United States and other developed countries. Too weak, right? They have sapped our economic energy and even our physical energy. The Jamaicans don't have the wherewithal. We don't have that sort of physical, the sinews of the muscles to fight them anymore. The United States chosen instruments for putting this strange, or the strategy, I should say, the United States chosen instruments for putting this strategy into effect were the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, to weaken you, right? To denationalize you, so that you would not have any sovereignty. So if you think we're a sovereign nation, we are not. Once you are in the clutches of the IMF, you are not a sovereign nation, okay? Because the borrower is slave to the lender, right? The borrower is slave to the lender. Like the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, the World Bank and the IMF were created after World War II to manage the international economy and prevent a recurrence of the beggar thy neighbor policies of the 1930s. What has to be understood is that both the fund and the bank are actually surrogates of the US Treasury, right? They are surrogates of the US Treasury. So when we talk about Elon Musk, behaving and like the IMF, it's the US behaving, it's the US imposing its austerity on its own people and enslaving its own people. That is what is happening there at the moment. Transfer of the wealth, the transfer of wealth, the greatest perhaps transfer of wealth from the richest from the poorest to the richest, from the bottom to the top, is what is going to happen after the Trump administration, if God permits. if God permits. What has to be understood? I think I read that already. They are both located at 19th and H Streets Northwest in Washington, D.C., and their voting rules ensure that they can do anything without the approval of the Secretary of the Treasury. They are an independent body, and they are linked with the U.S. military-industrial complex. The political scientist Thomas Ferguson compares the IMF to the famous dog in the old RCA advertisements, listening to his master's voice, the Treasury, on a Victrola. So that is what Fayval Williams simply did. She listened to what her masters have told her to report to Jamaicans, right? But we have to understand that the history of the IMF, we have to understand the characteristics of globalization if we are going to understand what Fayval Williams is talking about and the world in which she lives. Because she's not living in the world of the ordinary Jamaican or the ordinary average working class people of the world. She's definitely not living in that world, right? She has graduated successfully from that world, never to return. Okay? We have to understand that. Now, I must juxtapose her presentation with that of Julian Robinson, which I found was of a much more competent debater than she was. Now, we need to put away this black and white and male and female sort of dichotomy. Yes, exists in the world, but guess what? Black and white and male or female is not going to be on your, on your flour, on your pound of flour or your pound of rice that you're trying to buy, or a chicken, or sending your children to school. You don't care who want to be finance minister as far as gender is concerned, right? What should be more interesting, or what should be more important, I should say, is their competence. Are they competent at what they are doing? We don't care if they come from Harvard. We don't care if they come from the University of the West Indies. We don't care if they come from NCU, from Northern Caribbean University. What we should care about is their competency. And Fayval Williams is a very qualified woman, but is she competent? No, she's not that competent, but she is qualified. Right? Beyond the shadow of a doubt, she is a qualified woman. And people like to say, yes, they say that she's the most qualified person in the country. Who else could ever be finance minister? And yesterday I challenged a friend of mine on the phone by saying to her that I would have preferred if Juliet, I'm no fan of Juliet Holness, but I think she would have presented a better budget debate. I think she would have. People would say, oh, well, she's the prime minister's wife. Yes. And people would argue, why is she also now the head of and she doesn't have any qualification in finance. But these people, you don't have to have any qualification in finance. What happens with the globalization? It's something that is rigged. It's something that is already pre-made. And they just send the data to you and you just write a speech. Because you can't veer away from what the market is. And the market is not controlled. The market is just like a religion. The market is like a religion. So that is what they've set it up for you as a religion. You believe it and you say, wow, that's incredible. That's an incredible presentation, when nothing was in that presentation, when it was lacking in any reality. But we're living in an artificial world. So people like to see and to hear anything that is artificial, including speeches from our governments. Yeah, but Julian's speech was more credible, much more fluent, I would say, and it aligned with more of a development strategy and development goal, which Fayval Williams' speech lacked. I think Fayval and the GLP government are suffering from political fatigue. I think that after 8 years, you need to go. 8, 9 years, I think, yeah, party needs to go. I don't believe in third terms. I don't believe in it. Because there is some amount of arrogance that comes with it, that I am the party and I can do whatever I like. And I don't have to. Sometimes also, when you are tired, your brain cannot think. And it lacks a freshness, right? The bold ideas that you need to think about when you're not fatigued, right? After you've gotten some rest. And I think that the GLP, having gone, 8 years straight in office, need to go. Or is it 9 years now? Right, they need to go now so that they can, refresh themselves, and then they can come back if they so desire. If the people actually desire that they return. But the Fayval government is so out of touch that she could not see herself speaking about development. She just had to press the gas on what the IMF is telling her. But Julian Robinson sort of there in a way, even though he's going to continue the path of a Fayval and of an Andrew Holness, but he has to give you some amount of opposition, and that's what he was doing. And he did a great job of it. He did a fine job. I would give Julian Robinson an A+ for the speech that he delivered in Parliament. And I never saw him as anybody I would listen to, but I was able to listen to him. He captivated my attention in Parliament as he delivered a masterful speech in which he spoke about the realities of ordinary Jamaicans. And he did speak about his constituency. The fact that there are times within his constituency where parents don't even have bus fare or lunch money to send their children to school. So on that basis, according to him, now I'm not suggesting that he's going to do it, because a lot of time they make promises and they are unachievable, right? But according to him, according to ascarding to Julian Robinson, as you like to say, according to Julian Robinson, he will be providing meals for all students in the public school system, which is great. If that happens, great. And I think he talked about addressing the bus problem too, which I think the government needs also to buy school buses and to transport our children to and from school. Not only the fact that, some parents can't afford lunch, bus fare every day, but the fact also for their safety. Too many of our children are engaged in some terrible activities after school, and also the fact that they are not safe on our roads, right? They're not safe on Jamaican roads. So it would be nice if the children can be transported to and from their school, right? So I hope that the government could work on that. But Julian Robinson also mentioned about, if the PNP gets into power, that he will be offering a flat rate for senior citizens, 65 years and older, on their water bill. I mean, I thought that was a little bit not properly thought out, because he said it's a flat rate doesn't mean a flat rate. It means a progressive rate in which, based on your consumption, then that is what they're going to, the bill that they're going to send you. It's either it's flat or it's not flat, Julian Robinson. That needs to be thought out a little bit more. And why didn't you just say a flat rate? It's electioneering, so you were allowed to do that, as you do in many other situations. So he did say that. I think that those were two highlights of his presentation. And the fact that he talked about a growth agenda, that we need to move now away, now that we have achieved some amount of macroeconomic stability, that we need now to have a growth agenda for our people. We need to have a growth agenda for people which was lacking in Fayval Williams' speech. I think that she did not deal with that. And as a result of that, her budget presentation, her budget debate was lacking. And I don't know if I could offer her more than a C- for what she actually did. Because maybe an A+ she probably would get for the likes of Andrew Holness and the elites in Jamaica. Yeah, so. But for Jamaica and for Jamaica's development, I think that I would have to offer her a C minus. She would have to be and come again, right? With that development strategy and development goal, so that because even Mia Motley, the great neoliberalist, right? The great neoliberalist. Even Mia Motley understood when she was inking out an agreement with the IMF, and the IMF wanted Barbados to have a seven, I think a seven primary surplus, and she said no, no way, Jose. And they went down to 6.5, and she said no, she can't accept that. She can't run with that because she wanted to have, and eventually they agreed to a 6. If, maybe they're now down to a 5. I don't know. Who knows? But the fact is that insisted, she insisted that she had to have had a development goal for Barbados. Jamaica, on the other hand, did not do that. Maybe we didn't have the wherewithal. We didn't have the equity. We didn't have the negotiating tool to do that. As a result of that, the IMF and the World Bank came in, and they have continued to do so, run roughshod over the Jamaican people. Right? Now, Julian Robinson also corrected the information that many of us have had about the government, not having to borrow because they have enough money to do business, to take care of business. But was that true? Was that true? I don't know if that was true. And I think that, that he was able to do that. He did a very good job of, correcting that sort of misinformation, that the government is going to borrow $158 billion. That's what he suggested in his speech. So, that was good that he was able to correct that, because many people were of this assumption that the government doesn't have to borrow any more money, because we have enough money and we have paid down a lot of our debt, so we don't have to. And, Fayval Williams did not say that, and she really stood up and she corrected, well, she tried to tell him that she did not say that, she did not speak that irresponsibly. However, there were other members of the JLP government which gave that impression. But, I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and she was saying that really it's not that they were saying that, it's they were saying that they don't have to borrow in US dollars, they can now borrow in Jamaican currency. Whatever it was, I think I did hear some of them saying, including the Prime Minister, that, we don't have to borrow, we have our own funds to use, because Jamaica is awash with cash. That was what was coming out of Jamaica, particularly, November of last year and onwards. Maybe before, I think probably September of last year, people were saying back then that Jamaica is awash with cash. And I'm wondering, where is that cash coming from? And we're a poverty-stricken country. Are we pushing some marijuana? Don't know. But that is what they were suggesting there. Now, Julian Robinson also was very, he was very strident on the fact that we are behind as a nation, and we need to deal with that situation, particularly the matter of food insecurity, that too many Jamaicans were struggling in spite of the fact that we're talking about this macroeconomic stability. And I thought that I would have to applaud him there. And if the elections were to be called tomorrow, based on the debates, I think the PNP government would win. Right? The PNP government would win the election based on the debates. If the election were called tomorrow, based on, if elections were to be won, right, only on budget debates, I'm not saying that is so. I'm saying that I am giving you the condition, and don't tell me that, oh, you're a hypocrite because you're saying the PNP is going to win and the JLP is going to win tomorrow. I am assessing the political climate. Nobody knows who's going to win. Nobody but God knows who's going to win. But as human beings, we can assess what we see on the ground, in parliaments, on the political landscape, right? And suggest that this person, based on what we're seeing, might be the candidate to win. Now, whether the PNP wins or the JLP wins, it doesn't matter. I've presented a video on that. Go and watch it. I've presented a video that it doesn't matter. In fact, my last video that I made, that was the essence of what I said. It doesn't matter who will, because you're not winning. At the end of the day, the World Bank wins, the IMF wins, the American elites win, and the Jamaican elites win. You are not winning anything. You are not winning anything. So you can go and dance and you vote for Labour and the PNP and shower and all of that stuff. You can shower all you want to shower, right? You can shower all you want to shower and put your fist up and all of that, and you're green and decked in green and orange, whatever. At the end of the day, you are losing. You and your children are losing because these people are not there to represent you. These people are not there to represent you. I am only suggesting here that when I listened, having listened to Julian Robinson, which I know that it's just election promise. Remember now that these debates are just proposals of what they are going to do. It doesn't mean, therefore, that they are achievable. And many of you are sending me something, oh, this JLP is going to do that, or PNP is going to do that. Oh, yeah. Okay. Haven't we been hearing that, since the devil was a boy, what they're going to do and what they're not going to do? And at the end of the day, they achieve very little of what they say that they were going to do. But you have not woken up yet. You still are little children with little minds, right? So your parents promise you some bun and cheese and you're happy. You're wagging your tail like the dog, happy to get your bun and cheese, right? Without one iota of intellectual acuity that, look here, I have seen this before, and I don't think that he or she, my parents, are going to bring home the bun and cheese, right? So that's my perspective on the debates. I didn't ask you to like, share, and subscribe. Yeah, sometimes I'm so, caught up with what I'm saying. But may I ask you to like, share, and subscribe? Make sure that you like the videos. The videos can be shared with as many people on the platform, right? And I'm suggesting again, based on the budget presentations, if the elections were going to be called tomorrow, if they were to be called tomorrow, the PNP would stand a greater chance of winning the election based on the presentation, because Fayval presentation was extremely weak. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe. See you in another one.